Our next panel discussion is on strategic defense, space, regional, and Indo-Pacific. And this session is being jointly organized by the Space and Earth Partners and Advisory and My Security Media, Australia. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to welcome on stage our distinguished chair, former Ambassador Rakesh Sood. Let's put our hands together to welcome our chairperson onto the stage, former Ambassador Rakesh Sood. Inviting our distinguished moderator, Mr. Chris Cubbage, Space and Earth Partners and Advisory. Warm welcome to you. Inviting our eminent panelist, Air Vice Marshal Manu Midha, Director General DSA, Brigadier Arun Sehgal, retired Director of the Forum for Strategic Initiative, Mr. Suyash Singh, CEO Galaxeye Space, and Mr. Venkat Pillay, CEO and founder Lat Connect 16. नेमप्लेट कम है क्या? 1:06 है. Distinguished diplomat, our chairperson, former Ambassador Rakesh Sood, senior military officers. Chair. 2+1. Or chair. Distinguished moderator, Mr. Chris Cubbage, Space and Earth Partners and Advisory, senior military officers, industry leaders, international partners, and esteemed delegates. A very warm welcome to each one of you to the next session, which is a panel discussion on strategic defense, space, regional, and Indo-Pacific, which will examine how space is reshaping a collective security framework across the region. Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored to host this session jointly with Space and Earth Partners and Advisory and My Security Media, Australia. We thank our Australian partners for contributing to this vital Indo-Pacific dialogue and strengthening the cross-regional cooperations. And to carry forward the proceedings of the session, may I hand over to our distinguished moderator, Mr. Chris Cubbage, Space and Earth Partners and Advisory. And before I hand over to you, sir, may I kindly request to close the proceedings latest by 1:15. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and also a very big thanks to SIA-INDIA. We're wonderful to be back in New Delhi. We were media partners to the India Space Congress last year, and this session comes out of a quad series that we launched last June with SIA-INDIA, and we followed up in Sydney in September alongside the International Astronautical Congress. We also ran a Five Nations Partner Forum and our Indo-Pacific Robotics, Autonomy, AI and Cyber Conference in Perth, Western Australia, and we have SIA-INDIA as our regional knowledge partner. So hence, taking a regional scope, it's been a nice couple of days hearing a very India-focused session. It's the first time that I'm hearing the Quad mentioned. If you don't know what the Quad is, it's a Quad is a security dialogue between India, Japan, the United States and Australia. And the Five Nations Partner Forum includes the UK, Canada and New Zealand within that as well. So as Space and Earth Partners and Advisory and My Security Media, we take a regional focus. We have channels like the Asia-Pacific Security Magazine and our Space and Defence channels, and also cyber is also a big part of what we do. Thank you very much to our panel. I won't go too much into sort of the scope of what we're going to be discussing, but we have obviously the Defence Space Agency here with the Air Vice Marshal. Very pleased also to have an ambassador, former ambassador. In terms of your role, Ambassador, please contribute to the discussion. as we look at the diplomatic approach, I suppose, across the region. And then very importantly, we've got industry here that we'll get their insights from. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to former Ambassador Rakesh Sood, just to provide sort of his insights into this particular topic of strategic defence space, regional and Indo-Pacific, and we will also have time to take questions from the audience, particularly those, I do see an international audience here, the French in particular sort of stand out to me, but I was aware that the Americans and the Australians are also here. And it might be the first time you're hearing an Australian accent too, so hopefully you can understand me also. Former Ambassador, over to you for some opening words.
Thank you. Strategic defence space is a concept which is relatively new. You know, if we look at Indo-Pacific, which again is a new concept, relatively speaking, there are about 40 odd countries in the Indo-Pacific. Out of these, 10 are ASEAN members, 14 are Pacific Island countries of relatively small size, Fiji, Vanuatu, Marshall Islands, and so on. Then, of course, you've got Australia and New Zealand. And up north, you've got Japan and South Korea. You have South Asia, China, and that's what makes up the 40. Now, clearly, space capabilities, and particularly space defense capabilities, are not uniformly distributed in this region. India is probably the oldest. We set up ISRO in 1971. But at that time, it was not intended to serve a strategic defense role. It was intended to serve an economic, socio-economic development role, and that was the thing. The defense space capabilities essentially emerged post-Kargil, I would say. So that defense space notion is something that is more recent. And of all the countries in the region, if I look around, China has had a mature space capability, roughly going back same time of years as India. But it always had a strategic dimension to it. Japan has a full-fledged comprehensive capability. And none of the others actually have comprehensive space capabilities, other than the two extra-regional powers, which is US and France, but are active in the region of Indo-Pacific. So when we come to defense space cooperation, which is why in the Quad itself, when we set up the space-related working group in 2021, it had three purposes, or it had three working objectives. One was sharing of satellite data to the extent possible for maritime monitoring. The second was capacity building for sustainable development. And the third was consultations on norms and guidelines to determine future capabilities and operations. In terms of private sector approaches, once again, it is extremely limited. In India, we have seen in the last 5 years an enormous explosion of private sector interest. And hopefully, in the current financial year, we may even see a space activities low, something which is, according to me, sorely needed to create a more enabling environment for our private sector. But at this stage, I would say that in terms of strategic defense space, the cooperation that we would have is somewhat exploratory. And I think I would leave it to AVM Midha to talk about the countries with which we can possibly visualize strategic defense cooperation. So we would look at it I would suggest that we should look at it from two aspects. One is the strategic defense cooperation, which obviously means that we will work with countries who are our strategic partners, number one. And number two, who have capabilities where we find exchanges to be mutually beneficial. The second area of potential cooperation would be private sector to private sector. In terms of our startups, our small space-related companies that are coming up, both in terms of ISR, we heard in the previous session the role that is being played by our private sector for sustained space surveillance. Out of the space-based surveillance project, more than half are supposed to be from the more than half the satellites are supposed to be fabricated by the private sector. So, and I'm sure that there would be other companies that are coming up, other startups that are coming up in other countries, whether it is Australia, whether it is among the ASEAN countries, whether it is in New Zealand and so on. So perhaps there would be a scope there, but that would require a different approach, which is more of a private sector to private sector familiarity and think tanks operating on that scale, not so much as government to government. So with that, I would just stop here, and I would urge perhaps if AVM Midha could talk to us about potential for cooperation with our strategic partners in space and where would we find those, and for our private sector participants as to how they look at the startup scene in some of the other countries of the Indo-Pacific, because it is highly diverse and not at all uniform. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I suppose as a brief introduction to the Air Vice Marshal, just my observations from Australia as well, and dealings with, say, the US. I'm saying that the space domain is slightly different with military and the private sector. There's a little bit more crossover. In Australia, Lieutenant General Coyle is in charge of she's the Chief of Joint Capabilities, where the Australian Defence Force looks at cyber and space together, but she does have an outreach. So I just heard her speaking at a PNT conference in Sydney, highlighting the importance of PNT in particular. And then also last year, just before he handed over, Brigadier General Anthony Mastila from the Commander of the United States Indo-Pacific out of Hawaii was also highlighting in Australia, speaking to industry on the importance of the space domain in this contest, in a contested environment, I should say, in terms of what was emphasised. So it's wonderful to have you here, Air Vice Marshal, engaging with industry. And how does that sort of fit with the military? As the Ambassador said, the industry to industry, private to private, but also how you engage with industry and some of your expectations from industry. The Colonel in the previous session highlighted some of the capabilities that you're looking for over the next sort of 4 years. But yeah, just maybe if you can outline the role of the Defence Space Agency and some of your expectations from the people in the room. Yes, please.
Morning, everyone. At the outset, a very many thanks to SIA for inviting me for this panel today, and to the chair, Ambassador, Moderator, Chris, and the panelists on the dais, and everyone present in the hall. Before we start trying to get into the specific questions that in some manner had been directly put on to me before I even start, I would like to take 5 minutes to what I intended to say. So it has been very aptly brought out by the Ambassador about the geopolitical scenario we are. And today, as we are sitting out here to discuss space cooperation, we are actually in a very fragmented global order, where the traditional rules of the road are being rewritten. The current geopolitical environment is marked by heightened US-China rivalry dominating the Indo-Pacific, Russia-Ukraine conflict underscoring instability in Europe, the fragile Middle East ceasefires in Gaza and Lebanon, and the potential Iran escalation, which is adding complications to the picture. Pardon my using acronym, but I really do feel that world today is actually a VUCA environment. And in this contemporary geopolitical landscape, the space has emerged as a potential arena of strategic contestation. Today, high ground is no longer a metaphor in the military textbooks. It's a literal orbital reality. Today, geographical regions are not just maritime or aerial theaters. They are space-integrated domain. For India, with a coastline of about 1,500 kilometers, and if we talk about the Indo-Pacific, about 50 million square kilometers, the geographic area is actually vast. The lines between the terrestrial security and the orbital stability have blurred, where dominance in space will actually dictate victory. Not want to go into too much detail of how the space contributes towards a war-fighting capability. Suffice to say that it constitutes the foundational enabler of operational superiority in a multi-domain warfare. However, the growth in the space capability and the space activities of various players has outpaced the development of space traffic management governance processes, procedures, mechanisms, and institutions that are needed to maintain space situational awareness and reduce the likelihood of collisions. Complicating matter further, information of adversary intent, behavior, and capabilities is very, very sparse. And it can be difficult to distinguish among deliberate actions, accidents, and acts of nature. I think I will not be off the mark when I say, and perhaps it answers the question as brought out by the ambassador, that today the strategic landscape is defined by multipolarity with multilateralism. I can foresee 4 major pillars of cooperation where nations can contribute towards a stable space, and herein I don't restrict myself to the nations only in the Indo-Pacific. After all, as Carl Sagan had said, space is the only home we have ever known. It underscores our responsibility to deal it with more kindly with one another. The 4 places where I think we can contribute amongst the nations. The first is communications. Robust and regular communication channels can alleviate risk of unintended escalation. It is well acknowledged that opening communication channels and establishing mechanisms for information sharing can reduce mistrust and help stabilize actions. Technology sharing. The sharing of technology amongst partners can contribute immensely towards space. By co-developing technologies and sharing high-end ISR data, we can move from a collection of isolated sensors to a unified, resilient mesh network. Technology synergy also allows us to bypass the valley of death in R&D, spreading the high cost of developing space-grade components across a broader base. Furthermore, sharing creates interoperability by design, ensuring that our systems can speak the same language, share the same data. When the scale of the domain is so vast as we are talking about, and the threats are multifaceted, value lies in not only what we build, but how effectively we conduct and collaborate. Sharing of TTPs and the best practices. Beyond the hardware, our resilience in the space domain can be improved by standardization of tactics, techniques, and procedures. In the high-stakes environment of orbital mechanics, where an error of a few milliseconds can lead to a catastrophic collision or the loss of a critical link, thinking in silos is a liability. Sharing TTPs allows us to move beyond mere hardware compatibility to operational fluency. And last but not the least is making the best use of complementary capabilities. Today, no single nation can provide the full spectrum of orbital persistence, deep space telemetry, and rapid launch recovery. By mapping our unique strengths, we can create a system of systems. The synergy can ensure that a gap in one partner's capability is bridged by another's surplus. So as we forge ahead, let us remember Sun Tzu. In the midst of chaos, there is also opportunity. So let's put our heads together to work out how we can seize the opportunity in this chaos. And in this chaos, the opportunity that we have is a robust, vibrant ecosystem of the space which is being developed in the country, the startups that are coming up. In my opinion, the startups that are coming up in the country right now are a product of a long policy, whether intended or otherwise, for this and the efforts of the government. The startups are agile, not agile and hungry for doing something new. They are not scared of taking experiments, taking new risks, not scared of innovating, and wherein lies their strength. In my opinion, the next solutions for the next day problems are going to come up from these startups. Some of the constraints which any startup may have, not only in India, and that's the nature of a startup, would have to be navigated by the deft leadership and the entrepreneurial skills of the leaders. But they do provide an opportunity not only to find the solution, but also collaborate with other similar startups or industry across the nations, as well as established players within the country. We at DSC are really looking forward to the contributions that may come from our startups in the country. Rest of the questions, I think we can take it in the question answer session.
Thank you, Vice Marshal. Thank you. Warm round of applause, please. Yeah, I did have a script, but I tend not to stick to the script. That's the thing. You mentioned chaos in there. Some opening words, if we can, please, with Brigadier Arun, Sehgal, Director of the Forum of Strategic Initiative, and serve about 7 or 8 minutes as you prepare. Thank you very much.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to this august audience and part of this very high panel. Previous speakers have talked about the situation in Indo-Pacific. He talked about what is happening in Indo-Pacific, and the last speaker had talked about collaboration. But I'm going to be shifting track a little to highlight to you the state of play in Indo-Pacific. What is happening in Indo-Pacific? After all, when you're developing capacities, capabilities, what is the challenge? What is the threat? How is it manifesting? So when we look at least from my perspective, when we look at the Indo-Pacific, I see a pronounced trend in development of kinetic and non-kinetic weapons, including electronic and cyber challenges. China and Russia are advancing their counter-space capabilities, including direct ascent ASAT, DEW, direct energy weapons, jamming and spoofing. Please try to understand, when you look at Indo-Pacific, visualize it from east to west, the whole region is in a state of some kind of a semi or a full conflict. There is a major American fleet which is already building up around the Persian Gulf and in the Red Sea, around in that area. I was just now in Bahrain. I saw the 6th Fleet in action over there. And then we have in the east constant trouble in the first island chain, South China Sea, Indonesia, what's happening within Japan and China. So you have this whole issue. So what we are looking at it is, there is this whole aspect of China, Russia and US advancing the counter-space capabilities, including direct ascent like talked about. Then Iran and North Korea are developing space capabilities. Iran is focusing on satellites, launch and cyber attacks. And now there are reports that they're going to get advanced cruise missiles. Interesting facet. The other day we learned about how the Chinese are providing satellite data to the Iranians, indicating every single ship movement of the American forces deployed in the region. There is this GPS jamming and spoofing, which has become widespread in all conflict zones, disrupting not only military operations, but also commercial activities like civil aviation. Added to above is the risk of targeted cyber attacks on critical infrastructures and other space assets. RPOs are becoming common, raising concerns about misinterpretation of satellite behavior and leading to potential risk escalation. What are the specific challenges in the Indo-Pacific? Chinese are increasingly focused upon their military space operation, including development of highly maneuverable satellites, counter-space weapons. Demonstrated advanced RPO capabilities can be used for surveillance and offensive purposes against regional actors. PLA is reorganizing itself into an aerospace force aimed at dominating space as a military domain all across Asia in the first instance and then carrying on to the global levels. What is the vulnerability of this? Is creating what I call a vulnerability of regional space assets. GPS jamming and spoofing is widespread in the region. South China Sea, IOR, Korean Peninsula, East China Sea I talked about. Disruptive threats to critical infrastructures affecting military operations, civil aviations, creating risk to regional public safety and economics. Persistent cyber attacks are targeting space systems. The next is the issue of space debris risks. The Indo-Pacific faces significant space risks from space debris, which could lead to unintentional collisions, as we are all aware. Particularly our interest are the debris from Chinese rockets bodies. Chinese tendency to leave upper stages of rockets in high altitudes, like the Long March 6A and 8 rockets, could result in a long-term debris risk with rocket bodies remaining in orbit for over a century. Unintentional debris generation, events such as satellite breakups and rocket stage explosions, have created a significant amount of space debris. Cyber threats, Chinese cyber activities, space bomber groups have targeted satellite services and defense-related industries, including those in Taiwan and other regional countries. North Korea has conducted cyber attacks on defense, aerospace, and satellite industries. And similarly, we are seeing a similar kind of action around us by the Chinese in our region. We saw that during Ops Sindoor. Geopolitical competition is increasing, as highlighted by the ambassador. US-China rivalry, the rivalry between the two states in space is intensifying, with both nations developing advanced space capabilities. What is most important is for audience over here is the commercial space sector. There is a growing role of commercial space companies in the region, introducing new vulnerabilities as these entities may become targets of geopolitical conflicts. I'd like to highlight some steps that are needed to address these challenges. The first fundamental point we need to look at is enhanced space situational awareness. Develop advanced tracking systems to monitor space objects and debris. When we're talking about collaboration, we're talking about cooperation. These are some of the areas that we need to be looking at. Second is establish regional cybersecurity frameworks for threat intelligence sharing. Mitigate space debris. Joint programs that invest in debris removal and technologies to reduce collision risks. Advocate for global agreements on responsible space launch practices, including mandatory deorbiting of rocket stages. Develop defensive counter-space capabilities, which includes deploy bodyguard satellites equipped with non-kinetic defensive systems, example jammers, lasers, to protect high-value assets. Focus on low debris causing counter-space weapons to ensure the sustainability of the space environment. Another area of importance is, which is often talked about and done little about, is the establishment of international norms. Lead efforts to establish norms for responsible behavior in space. Some people call it, look at the 1972 US-Soviet Agreement on Incidents at Sea. Promote global adoption of bans on debris-generating anti-satellite weapon tests. Norms against targeting of commercial satellites such as communication and Earth observation. And lastly is strengthening regional cooperation. Enhance regional cooperation with partners like US, Japan, India, and Australia we talked about. And joint space and security strategies. Provide technical and financial support to other regional partners to strengthen their space capabilities. I also had some points from the moderator. You want me to go ahead with the think tanks, or would you like me to stop here?
For the interest of time, we might.
Yeah, okay. I'll stop here.
You've provided an excellent overview. I think it's to summarise, the state's in a world of flux right now. One key word that hasn't been mentioned is trust. There's a lot of call for collaboration and partnerships partnerships are key, but they have to be trusted partnerships. So one of the outcomes for this particular session is how we build those trusted partnerships and have those strong foundations that you can trust for the longer period of time. But the other one is in this period of flux, and we are in a war footing, that's the general feeling, is the speed of innovation and the call for new innovation and new capability as everyone uplifts across the region. And hence that provides the private sector with the opportunity as well, and particularly around space situational awareness and the like. Hence why we've got some startups. And I do apologise, my apologies to XD Links. Dr. Kumar was originally going to be on the panel here in front of me, so we had a plan. So we did have 3 startups in mind, but Galaxeye, you sort of work with XD Links anyway, so you might be able to mention them as well. Part of what we do in terms of our business development role as well is have partners in the region. So one of our national partners that we've been working with for some time, based in Western Australia in Malaysia, is Venkat Pillay, the CEO and founder with LatConnect 60. Venkat, from what you're hearing today and the opportunities that provides, you're literally here for this panel today as well, so thank you very much for coming. And yeah, how you see the Indian sector here across the Indo-Pacific as we have our conversations further south. Yeah, what the opportunities might be attached to your capabilities. Maybe outline those first.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for having me. Venkat Pillay here, founder and CEO of LC60. We're a Perth, Western Australian company. I'm of Indian heritage, as you can clearly see, but grew up in Malaysia. Spent a lot of time in Western Australia. So I like to think that with at least my exposure and also working in Canada and the US can bring maybe a slightly more interesting take from a private sector perspective to what I've been hearing. And it also kind of weaves in a little bit into how LC60 was founded. And I promise, Chris, I will answer your question. But maybe just to start with a bit of background. So LatConnect 60 is a Perth, Western Australian headquartered company. We're about close to 50 people now, 20 of them in Perth, about 25 to 30 people in Malaysia. And I heard some points during the start of this session around startups and startups working together in separate regions. LC60 as a company grew up across 2 countries from day one. We're headquartered in Western Australia, but we also had an operations in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And so we understood how it is to work across borders and build a team. Today we have an office in Abu Dhabi as well. And we've just announced an Indian office as well and set up an office in Bangalore that's ongoing. But what we do as a company is Earth observation satellites and downstream Earth observation insights. And we started with civil use cases first, because defense, as we all know here, needs to see proven capability. We needed to prove out our capabilities in agriculture, in maritime, and that's what we did. And we did that in Western Australia, the West Australian government. Today, all 13 departments in WA government use our downstream Earth observation data analytics. We pull data from over 30 different satellites, optical, SAR, SIGINT, hyperspectral. And we provide insights to these government departments. In Malaysia, we work with the Rice and Grain Agency. I know we are here talking about defense and security, but there's another security which is also important, and that's food security. And that's just what we do in Malaysia. Over 200,000 farmers today get their analytics from us, rice farmers. And so that I often quip that the farmers in Malaysia get insights quicker than the Malaysian Space Agency. And the reason is because the speed at which we bring the data in, convert it to insights, push it in a very easy-to-use way to farmers. The same thing I see here from a defense point of view, and now bringing it to the Indian context. We are launching some infrared satellites, which we think would be very interesting for the Indian government. But what I firstly see is that India as a country leaps and bounds above, of course, where the rest of even Australia and Malaysia, if I can speak very openly, are in terms of space capabilities. India is definitely leading in that forefront. Where I think Australia, Malaysia, and the broader Indo-Pacific can work with India is providing enabling opportunities. One such opportunity, if I can be so bold to bring up, is an opportunity I'm involved in with a spaceport in Malaysia. It's the only spaceport now that's been sanctioned by the Malaysian government, and it's been opened quite internationally. And very recently, when Prime Minister Modi visited Malaysia and met with the Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim, I attended that event. And this spaceport was actually brought up as an opportunity for Indian companies to actually establish and grow a presence in Malaysia, particularly for, where there'd be re-entry services. We heard talked about long-range radars. These are the kinds of capabilities that potentially through bilateral arrangements between India and Malaysia, or even India and Australia, could look at cross-collaboration. And that's where we as LC60 very keen to be involved with and collaborate.
And likewise, we are here literally talking to the Indians because of the call to action that you have, every country has, but again, representing from Australia and Southeast Asia, and we're very well connected through the ASEAN networks, and I'm glad you've raised also the Ambassador of the Pacific is very important too. We are also willing to represent Indian companies into the region as well. So India for us, it came up in discussion briefly yesterday that there was a sense that you might have been underselling yourselves here in India. I think from our perspective, India is very much leading the world within the space economy. So you should be very proud of what you're already doing. And obviously you're calling for more. But we do see India as a big opportunity, hence why our partners like SIA-INDIA are long-term regional knowledge partners for us, so we can learn as much and to have that capability. So to hand over to Suyash Singh, Galaxeye also doing some very interesting work. But you are based here, yes? So maybe introduce, and for those who don't know, and then also I think some of your key partners that you're working with as well, and you have to mention XD Links within that framework.
Great. I think Dr. Sudhir has done a great job for mentioning XD Links multiple times. Amazing. All right. So I'm Suyash. I'm the co-founder CEO of Galaxeye. We're a Bangalore-based space tech startup company, started from IIT Madras. 5 founders, started in 2021. Started with 5 members, now 110 in totality. We are a very IP-led innovation company, right? We are not a system integrator who bring 5 components from different places and just put it together. We build our own sensors, and we have done that in and out for the last 4.5 years. We've tested our sensors, and which is world's first of its own kind. It's called OptoSAR. It's world's first OptoSAR that's going to go on a satellite for the very first time in next 2 months. It also happens to, and the technology that I'm talking about has been tested on drones, aircrafts, HAPS, and multiple platforms, so to say. And finally, it's getting down onto a satellite, which is going to get launched very soon. This also happens to be India's largest privately built satellite so far, around 190 kgs. Also, world's first of its own kind. So that's what we do at Galaxeye, right? And I think when I started, talking about the two key points that I just want to mention, and then come back to your question. We're an IP-led company. When I say that, it means we are not just the people who are bringing components from outside and then just putting it together, and that is where collaboration opportunities also starts to open up, right? A lot of interest that we have received from European governments, even the governments in the Indo-Pacific, some of the countries that Ambassador was talking about, all these things have come together in some or the other form, even from Middle East, by the way. So this interest is now gearing up, because when you are technology led, it happens. And I think that's not just true for Galaxeye, but it is also true for many other companies in the country, right? India, instead of having a collaboration with the outside or the outer world, is not purely a buyer-seller relationship anymore, right? It has become much more than that. We are more IP-led, and there are co-collaborating opportunities, where systems are built, systems of trusts are built in India, and which can be given to the outside world. And that's starting to happen. Coming back to the topic of the discussion, which is collaborations around Indo-Pacific and regional from a strategic defense perspective, I think there are a bunch of initiatives that are being taken. There are a bunch of efforts that are being done by startups as well to go out and collaborate with others. But there is a level of geopolitical alignment, that has to happen. The FFN, the friendly foreign nation, is a very gray area, right? Who's who, we don't know. And I think that's what we need to all think, sit down and think about where we can go and collaborate and what's the synergy. Like recent trade agreements have been a great momentum. I think it is a signaling to say, where you can go and start doing those engagements. Supply chain resilience becomes very important, be it we providing a component to the other countries, or be it we buying from someone, right? That is a very, very important segment to be in, right? For example, in India, we have multiple partners that we work and we very much trust them. And there's great synergies. So we have Anand Technologies, we have XD-Links, we have multiple others, including Skyroot and so on and so forth. So different partners, we are like literally 100 kilometers away. We don't have to stamp our visas to go and talk to them. So supply chain resilience probably is building up in India, but we need more to come from outside as well. Data sharing has been talked about. I think that is the second point beyond supply chain, which also needs a little more geopolitical alignment. Multiple countries in the Southeast Asia have reached out to us to get data, but then after 2 or 3 conversations, it dries out. So I think what we need to do, and maybe you can definitely do that since you are in that particular business. We need to have forums where we can come together to talk on these specific topics of sharing data, talking about supply chain. And of course, the applications then definitely will roll out and indulge into it. But more or less, I think supply chain of components and supply chain of data and intelligence has to be there for all the other applications that we're talking about, be it enhanced SSA, ISR, or AI-based end-mile food security applications. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there. Maybe if you have any other specific questions, happy to answer them.
Very good, thank you. And it is easier said than done. The data sharing and the sharing of systems and capabilities is easy to say. It's hard to actually execute. When we talk about supply chain resilience, it's a trusted supply chain throughout. And so again, I'll come back to the word trust. And in a cybersecurity environment, the main principles are zero trust as well. So you take a zero trust approach, which is very hard in a trusted supply chain that has resilience. So you need to keep that in mind. Just conscious of time, I welcome, we've got everything from diplomats, air vice marshals through to CEOs. Welcome a couple of questions from the audience as we close off. Is there any questions from the audience before I close off with my last 2 questions? One here in the middle.
Sir, I am the Commander Sanjeev. My question is to Brigadier Sehgal. Sir, you mentioned about the counter-space capabilities, space threats, and even unintentional threats like space debris, which is not only affecting the Indo-Pacific but all the spacefaring nation. Sir, my question is that with Outer Space Treaty of 1967 not addressing any of these issues, what is the major bottleneck preventing all the spacefaring nation to come to some consciousness in these lines, where to certain agreements, sir? Why after 60 years nothing is happening in these lines, sir?
Beyond my pay grade, I will request the ambassador because I don't read the treaties. So, the ambassador is very happy to answer your question.
But I don't want to actually ask Chair that.
No. No, it's very simple. I mean, there is this notion about why has nothing happened in the domain of space, or today why are negotiations not underway, even though there is so much of technological development and there is so much of concern, whether it is about debris. We heard about best practices. We heard about Brigadier Sehgal was talking about best practices, regional cyber frameworks, and things like that. The reason is very simple. It is politics that drives these discussions. Today's politics, as has been pointed out by a number of speakers, is highly fragmented. I mean, we were talked about the Quad. Nobody really knows what the future of the Quad is, because the Quad is based on President Trump's moods. It's as simple as that. I mean, so therefore, we've not had a Quad summit. We don't know when that will take place. I think we all read the newspapers. We are aware of what is happening. So, and in the Quad, which was seen as and there was a framework working group that was set up on space. But if the future of Quad becomes a little uncertain today, then how do you think that is going to move forward? Secondly, you have very clear rivalries. You have rivalries between the major space powers. After all, which are the major space powers? The original two major space powers were US and the Soviet Union. Then came up China. Then you had the French, and the Japanese came up a little bit, India. And even today, and then the Europeans basically tried to combine their strengths together in the form of a European Space Agency so that they could be more of a match for the big boys. But that's about it. So now you have some capabilities that have come up in Brazil. And we have one of the oldest space programs. I mean, it's more than 70 years old, right? I mean, ISRO goes back. I don't think there are that many countries in the world, including Australia, I dare say. I mean, your Australian Space Agency is less than 10 years old. So there are in Asia, other than China and Japan, you don't have old space agency, legacy kind of things. And everywhere it was the governments. And there was a kind of a bipolar order, and that is how multilateral agreements are arrived at. When the major powers of the day see a virtue in a convergence, and they felt that it would be useful, and they can sell it to the rest of the world as a public good, you get an agreement. Today, you don't have that convergence of views among the major space powers of the day. And therefore, you have no agreements. As simple as that.
We did have an hour allocated for this session, but we've been cut short. I'm going to hand final words, because we could literally talk about that. We've just opened up. Thank you for the question. You've opened up a Pandora box. But it's the relevant question of what this panel wanted to ask in terms of the framework, and the Quad was sitting there as a suitable forum for Brigadier.
I just want to highlight two small things. Let's not look big. Let's try to create small areas of strategic cooperation, or what we call strategic transparency amongst Quad can be one of the reasons. Other areas, like we are depending on Southeast Asia partners. ASEAN is one area, South Asia is another area. So we have to build up these kind of partnerships. Second thing is standardizing, standards, create standards in information sharing. There is an excellent work being done by Gateway House, an Indian think tank in Mumbai, on data sharing. They are standardizing data sharing, so they're standardizing protocols for data sharing. So my idea is we will never get to the stage that you are looking at in a hurry, but we can certainly start looking in the regional and try to create degrees on maritime domain initiative, great area. Do we have standardized information sharing on black shipping or white shipping, whatever it is? Standardize those. That's some of the issues that is being tried to be addressed. So these are the areas that we need to be looking at, and here the think tanks are playing a great role. Only yesterday a report was released between us and the European Union on space-based, among others. Recently there was a meeting with the Americans and us, in which interestingly industry partners were participating. 14 members of the industry were participating in that meeting to basically to sort out all these issues of collaboration and moving forward towards in cooperative manner. So that's what I'm trying to say. Think small, let's consolidate and then push forward. World will fall into place.
Very good. I think on that note, we might close off the session. I think that's a good takeaway is I still hope fondly of the Quad. I don't think it's dead just yet, and hopefully we'll have you in Brisbane as the Quad Leaders Summit next year. But I think that is one framework, but I think also flipping it around, particularly from the startups and the private sector, is one step at a time, build that trust over time, and also understand where you are in the supply chain. So on that note, I think we're on for time and we're between you and lunch. So thank you very much, and please a warm round of applause for my esteemed panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, sir. And for wonderfully moderating this session, I would request our distinguished chair, former Ambassador Rakesh Sood, to kindly do the honours of presenting mementos to all our eminent panellists. We begin with honouring our distinguished moderator, Mr. Chris Cubbage, Space and Earth Partners and Advisory. Thank you, sir, once again for moderating the session. We present to Air Vice Marshal Manu Midha. We present to Brigadier Arun Sehgal. To Mr. Suyash Singh. And to Mr. Venkat Pillay. And may I invite on stage Mr. Anil Prakash, DG SIA-INDIA, to kindly do the honours of felicitating our distinguished chair, former Ambassador Rakesh Sood. And ladies and gentlemen, with that we close the proceedings after a group photograph of the panel. We close the proceedings of the session, inviting everyone to kindly join us for lunch. Once again, the lunch is served in the exhibition area. All our senior officers and speakers are invited to join us in the VIP lounge for the lunch. The next session will commence sharp at 2 o'clock. We request everyone to kindly be seated back in time. Thank you.
Yeah.